It's really a pleasure to be here, and I've had an incredibly full day of meeting so many people from the area, from artists, neuroscientists, researchers in all fields. And I wanted to spend a little time tonight sharing a bit about the work that I've been doing over the last 25 years in really thinking deeply about this intersection of the arts and science. But before I do, I would love to, see if I can make this move, tell you a little bit about what just happened here in an attempt to really bring home the way our brains and bodies really change on the arts. So listening to this beautiful piece that Adrian played, what I noticed was his parasympathetic nervous system was activated. Huh? Good, right? His brain was flooded with neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. And what I love is that he turned off that judgmental part of our brains that we all have, and he moved into a flow state. And in doing that, he was able to just let the music take him to another place and another time. And so what was happening to you? Sound vibrations reached you in just 3 milliseconds, and you were also flooded with neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine. And at the same time, you were feeling more relaxed as your cortisol levels lowered. And you entrained to the beat of the music, activating both alpha and beta waves. And then there was something that I consider to be maybe one of the most miraculous things, is that together we entrained with each other. And we started to fire together. Our neurons literally started to correlate to the rhythm of the music. We synchronized with each other, and we experienced similar emotions. And if by chance you felt a little awe-inspired, you're now more open and empathetic to each other. So, wow, what an amazing thing a piece of music can do for us. So, in our book, Your Brain on Art, that I wrote with Ivy Ross, we make a bold claim that we are standing on the verge of a cultural shift in which the arts can deliver potent, accessible, and proven health and well-being solutions to billions of people. And when I think about that, it really made me go back to really begin to understand the origins of how the arts really help to shape who we are. And so it took Ivy and I just 4 years to write the book, Your Brain on Art. And in that time, we interviewed over 120 people. In just 4 days, the book became a New York Times bestseller. It's now in its 11th printing, and it's been translated in over a dozen languages around the world. And you might ask, well, how can a book about the arts be so successful in such a short period of time? Our publisher told us that just doesn't happen. But what we've heard now from thousands of people is that the book validated what we already know about the arts, and that it gave us permission to be able to actually make art again. And many of us, have been shut down since age 8 when someone said, that doesn't look like a tree, or, oh, that's not very good, or your voice doesn't really carry. And so we, in some ways, have walked away from the arts because we were shamed, or there was a stigma around us not feeling that we are good enough to do it. But in this giving permission to do the arts again because we know now how good they are for us, we're seeing curriculums being built around the NeuroArts. We're seeing communities strengthen. We're seeing HR departments develop programs to work within corporations. And we're also rethinking architecture and design and creating really important new healthcare policies and public health programs. So I believe that the reason that Your Brain on Art has been so successful is because our world, and more important than ever, our world is hungry for better solutions. So this made me think more deeply about the role the arts once played in our lives. And in the book, I had an opportunity to interview indigenous cultures around the world and learned that there are still over 5,000 active tribes that are living the arts every day. But many of them don't have a word for the arts because it is literally how they live. They sing, they dance, they tell stories, they draw pictures. This is an image of a Colombian cave art painting, and it represents, in those days, literally daily life. So in researching the book, I had an opportunity to meet with E.O. Wilson, the evolutionary biologist at Harvard. And one of the things that he said to me that I think really stuck is that creative expression is the key to human evolution, and that without creative expression, without the arts, humanity could not have evolved. But what's also really interesting about that is that we only can create the way we do through our senses. And we create in so many different ways. And so just to level set, I define the arts as creative expression. And when I talk about the arts, I'm thinking about, today I was talking to someone, gardening is their art form. And I made the joke that it's the slowest art form. But, and it doesn't always go well. But you know, there are so many ways that we express ourselves. And if you think about just how you might do that, maybe it's in cooking, maybe it's in what you wear, maybe it's how you wear your hair, maybe it's how you create a piece of music or a creative writing, maybe it's in digital arts. It is literally endless. And because of technology and immersive experiences, we are literally creating new forms of expression every day. This is a graphic that I really love. It's a data visualization of some of the art modalities that we already know, from visual arts to culinary arts. When I look at this image, I see a pantry of ingredients, almost like a kind of new periodic table that has endless possibilities and endless combinations. So, you know, biologically, we've learned that the arts connect us by our senses. We use our sight, our sound, our touch, our smell, taste. That's how we create these visual stories, dance, music. And this quote by Jill Bolte Taylor, I think, is really an important one to reflect on. She says that most of us think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, but we're actually feeling creatures that think. So if you think about that, it's pretty amazing that so much of our energy is in our head, but we really feel first, and then we translate that into thought. And sometimes we kind of talk ourselves into thinking, oh, that's how we thought. We thought about this first. But cognitive scientists now are being able to show us that we're only conscious of about 5% of our mental activity. The rest of our experiences are actually happening physically, emotionally, and sensorially, below what we're actually thinking. And of course, the only way that we can experience the world and all of these experiences is through our amazing sensory systems. So I just want to give you a couple of data points. We could talk for hours about our sensory systems. They are such extraordinary tools for making us who we are. I said earlier today, you know, AI has sensors, but we have senses, and our senses are exquisite. So just to give you a couple of fun facts, you process over 24,000 images in an hour through your visual systems. In your lifetime, you'll process over 10 million images. Touch is such an extraordinary sense. You have over 200,000 touch receptors in your feet. Each of your fingers have 300 touch receptors. Your body has over 4 million touch receptors. And what's amazing is that it's through your somatosensory cortex, that by way of your spinal cord and the thalamus, that you actually release oxytocin and other hormones. So touch, our hands, are such an amazing tools for us to really be able to make sense of the world. Hearing, as I mentioned, reaches you, sound reaches you in just 3 milliseconds. And in part, that's because we're over 60% water. So we vibrate, we resonate. When you hear Chopin, it is coming through you. It's not just around you, it is in you. And we entrain so easily to the beat of music, and we were able to move in such different states, from alpha to beta to theta, through these waves. And that has huge implications for lots of areas of our lives, including relaxation, stress, and even sleep. So I think it's really important to say that our bodies bring the world in through our senses, but these senses connect and change through a process called neuroplasticity. And this is another sort of remarkable knowledge that we've learned over the last 100 years around how we actually can process all of this information. And so just to give you a little context for those of you who are not neuroscientists, we are born with about 100 billion neurons, and they connect at a synaptic level. So you're literally born ready to wire your brain and body. And we create quadrillions of connections in the brain that create these endless neural pathways that basically connect everything you do: movement, emotion, memory. We're constantly creating new neural pathways through those sensory inputs and through the saliency of those experiences. So sometimes we're making a memory and we're learning something through these inputs, and sometimes we're actually pruning those neural pathways because we're not using them. But what's really important is that it's the saliency of those experiences that really make a difference in how we become who we are. So this is an image by Greg Dunn. He's a neuroscientist and an artist. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide other than to say what I think he does is beautifully depict the complexity and the integration of the brain systems and structures. So you can see here that all of the sensory cortexes are involved. You can see the limbic system. You can look at the prefrontal cortex where, if you think about the sky traffic controller or the conductor, that's really helping us to make sense of what's happening at that limbic emotional level. All of these functions and structures connect through these highly efficient neural pathways. But in order for us to really create these strong neural pathways, we need salient experiences. And saliency really comes in two forms. One is practical, what's practical to you, what you need in order to function and to survive. And then also what's important to you, and that can be important to you because it has emotional relevance and creates great meaning for you. So, while philosophers and artists and children have always known the power of the arts, it's only been in the last 30 years that we've been able to non-invasively get inside our heads to really understand the impact of the arts. And data science and AI are actually starting to enhance our ability to understand this. So what I think is really remarkable about the arts, and I can't think of anything that does this in the same way, separate from exercise, separate from sleep, separate from good nutrition, is that the arts simultaneously, and I want to underscore that, simultaneously alter a complex physiological and neurological interconnected system that impacts physical and mental health, social connection and learning. So we're connecting our respiratory systems, our circulatory systems. We're looking at the endocrine system, immune system, muscular system. And this is happening simultaneously. So in essence, the superpower of our ability to use the arts for health, well-being, and learning is literally endless. And the science is rapidly accelerating. I usually say that artists got there first and the scientists are catching up. But in fact, the scientists are catching up, and they're adding another dimension to this work. So this is a chart from Anjan Chatterjee at University of Pennsylvania that's been tracking the PubMed citations of peer review research in this area over the last 60 years. And what you'll see is the last 2 years aren't here, but the research has absolutely skyrocketed. And so the number of neuroaesthetic papers in all disciplines, in all journals, is really extensive. So we are beginning to build an amazing body of research that we can use, that we can translate into different practices. And today I had the opportunity to meet with 40 plus researchers and art practitioners and others who are actually doing research in this work in your community that is literally groundbreaking. So the science is called neuroaesthetics, but the emerging field is called NeuroArts. And you are literally seeing the emergence of a new field right before your very eyes. We are at the beginning of this burgeoning field. So what happened with neuroscience 100 years ago, or what's been happening with women's health or bioethics or even climate change, NeuroArts is a new field. It's messy, but it's vibrant, and it's unbelievably broad across the entire world. And so just to give you a definition of NeuroArts, we define NeuroArts as an interdisciplinary science rooted in neuroaesthetics and what we call ways of knowing that measurably can understand the arts and aesthetic experiences and how importantly they can be translated into practices in health, well-being, learning, public health, and business. And that's really important because the reality is that these experiences show up in every area of our lives. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a visual on what this looks like, you can see that there are three intersecting circles: NeuroArts at the middle, technology, the arts, science, and health. And it really is in that intersection of these disciplines where we're really seeing a difference in the way that we can use multiple domains to be able to understand really complex problems. So I love this slide. I like to think about the elephant in the room when it comes to NeuroArts. For years, I'm at Johns Hopkins. For the first 10 years of my work at Johns Hopkins, every day I committed myself to say NeuroArts 50 times a day, because I figured if I said it enough, people would start to repeat it, and sure enough. But one of the things about this image I love is that the elephant is a metaphor for the arts. The first thing is that the arts are ancient, and they're powerful. Like the elephant, they are really something to behold. Secondly, depending upon where you touch the elephant, you're going to get something different. So if you're touching it for Parkinson's, you're probably going to get dance. If you're touching it for Alzheimer's, you're probably going to get singing or music. Mental health, you're going to be looking at mixed modalities. But what we know are that different art forms in different configurations are doing different things across these different sectors. And then the third thing that I think is important about the elephant is that it represents a cautionary tale. And that is that if we don't nurture the arts, we will lose them. And we have been losing them. We've been losing them in education. We've been losing them in our daily lives. We've been losing them in the communities and the societies that we live in. And so without them, we are less human. And I think there's something really important to remember, that this is a sacred space that we're working in when we think about the role of the arts. The good news is the arts are showing up in every sector, and that's giving us an opportunity to really deploy the research and the practices that are happening in really profound ways. And that's good, because without really reading through the slide, the need is great, whether you're looking at mental health or physical health or child development, or just the inability to be able to reach our full potential because of all of these uncertainties that we're facing in the world today. And that's across the lifespan. So we are very concerned about young people, but we're also concerned about the trajectory through aging and end-of-life care. And so one of the things that we know is that the arts and aesthetic experiences are actually democratizing healthcare, they're improving education and learning, and they're humanizing medicine. And that is an amazing thing to be saying in 2025. And so the other thing that I think is really important about this is that making or beholding the arts are not dependent on age, ability, race, or income. And the most important piece of data is that you don't have to be good at it in order to have tremendous benefits. And so as we start to see this work unfold, we're seeing it both as standalone interventions, practices, but also complementary interventions. I'm just going to go through a couple of very quick examples of how this NeuroArts work is showing up in different areas. And the first one is in early childhood. So listening and playing music is increasing neuroplasticity and building gray matter that supports things like cognitive skills, social emotional development. We're also seeing that singing with babies is changing the trajectory for moms with postpartum depression, also enhancing maternal health and bonding. And there's been some really beautiful research in Scandinavia that's now spreading quite broadly that's showing that when you use interventions like singing, you actually are reducing postpartum depression and reducing postpartum medication for depression, which is really important for the baby's health as well. This is an image of Mark Morris Dance Company. We're now seeing, with over 40 peer-reviewed papers, proof that dancing improves gait, mood, sleep, and cognition for Parkinson's patient, and also is lowering feelings of loneliness and isolation. And this is a really beautiful work that's been expanding all over the world. So Mark Morris's Dance for PD now is showing up in over 30 countries around the world. So this work is not only happening in certain locations, it's also scaling, and scaling dramatically. We know that this combination of AI and technology and music, in this case, is actually helping to address chronic pain and also anxiety at pretty staggering intervals. And we've done a little bit of work in looking at music and dementia in the NeuroArts blueprint, and what we've seen is that from an economic return on investment, we're now seeing an over 2-to-1 return on dollars saved when you use music interventions. And the implications for this in terms of being able to repurpose those dollars into other forms of healthcare related to the arts is really significant. So there's a lot of interesting evidence coming out in that space. And we're talking now with payer models, with CMS, to really begin to try to understand how we can bring this sort of value proposition to healthcare models to look at the way we think of paying. This is a fabulous whoops, one slide behind. This is a fabulous program called Creative Forces, where this intervention of using creative arts therapies is one of the few things that are helping veterans and active military recover from trauma, traumatic brain injury, and PTSD. And what they're seeing is just 45 minutes, regardless of the skill, is reducing stress by as much as 25%. And they're also able to process this trauma through visualization and narrative in a way that they've not been able to do with traditional kinds of cognitive therapy and medications. And this is a slide that is really interesting. This is a really interesting integration of technology, sound, and light. So this is a project in Venice, California called Chromosonics. And in just 15 minutes, they're able to really calm the nervous system. And what's interesting about it is, in this experience, you hear color and you see sound. And the result is this radical presence. So neuroscientists have now been looking at this to really understand what are the mechanisms that are taking place here. And this is the kind of thing that's showing up in malls, in libraries, in museums, and also in businesses. And we talked earlier today about the World Economic Forum and what are the workplace readiness tools that need to be in place for the next generation, for the workforce. And what we're seeing is that there's a real blur between work and life. And if you look at these 10, if you look at these 10 skills that are being told up to us that are readiness, over at least 5 of them are expressly enhanced through the arts. And so we're seeing things like curiosity, playful imaginary, sensory experiences, and also making and beholding being the core skills that are really important to build the kind of skills for the future that we really, really need. So I want to jump, if I can, here we go, to a moment to talk a little bit about the NeuroArts blueprint. To ensure that all of this work that we're talking about here becomes part of mainstream health, well-being, and learning, the blueprint was launched to really ensure a sustainable future. So our North Star is literally to make this work mainstream and sustainable. And We developed a logic model coming out of a document we wrote called the NeuroArts Blueprint. And it talks about 5 principles, 5 findings, and 5 recommendations. And you can see the recommendations here. And I just want to briefly talk through them. Very important to strengthen the research foundation. We need to honor and support the arts practitioners who are already doing this work. And we need to expand and enrich the educational and career pathways. We're doing a lot of this now, advocating for sustainable funding and effective policy, and building capacity, leadership, and communications. Those recommendations have paved the way for the 3 strategies that you see in the middle. So building evidence, building infrastructure, and building community. And we believe that if we can do that, we can have significant impact in the way that this work shows up in all the sectors we were talking about. So these are the initiatives that we have developed underneath of those strategies. And we'll be talking just about a couple of them in a moment, but you can see the idea here is if you can activate these initiatives at a local, regional, national, and even global level, we become to start to create this virtuous cycle, an ecosystem where the neuro arts become part of everything we do in every sector that we move in, and we move through all these sectors every single day. So the Community Arts Coalition is a part of the infrastructure, and this is the program that we're going to be launching here in Atlanta. And in another week or so, we will be announcing a learning network of 12 community neuroarts coalitions around the country. And it's super exciting because these are hyper-local community groups that are coming together, that are bringing all of the sectors, research, education, municipalities, artists, healthcare, to really join together to figure out what are the assets that a community has through the lens of the arts, and what are the problems that are most poignant and important to address, and then putting together a strategy on how to address those. So many of you maybe have never been here before, or maybe are just starting to learn about how the arts are being used in other parts of your community. But all of you are invited to be part of the Georgia NeuroArts Coalition, because we need all of you in all of these sectors to come together and really work together. I was describing this today, that in essence, there's often a lot of noise and sometimes not a lot of signal and not a lot of impact, despite best intentions. But what this program has been showing in now 3 cities, we've been working in New York City, Palm Beach, and Kansas City, is that when you move the wind in the sail, you move a lot faster. So part of this work, and it will be coordinated and managed through the Woodruff Center, is to bring everybody involved. So if you know people that are working in this space, whether it's in schools or community centers, with disaster relief, with people with neurodiversity, invite them to be part of this. There'll be a lot of drum beating to make sure that everyone really feels part of this, because it really takes everyone in a community to make this work. And we've seen huge success. I also like to say that when you have a deep community doing really great work, and you have other communities doing really great work, whether they're big or small, when you put them together, you really start to have the rhizomes that really bring the arts forward as our birthright, because we're wired for them to make a huge difference in our individual communities, but also in society at large. This is one other program I just want to mention briefly, which is the NeuroArts Academic Network. At a national and global level, we have launched this work, and you're also launching it here. We had our first meeting today. And this is really important from a workforce development perspective. Who are the folks that are going to be coming through these programs, and what do they need to train for, and what do they need to know? And then who are the professionals that are already in the field that really need to learn some additional materials that we've gained through some of the work that we've been doing with researchers, with practitioners, so that they're bringing the state of the field best practices to their practices. And so what would this mean for us if we were able to do this? And I like to think about this, because when you really step back and you think about, sometimes you can do a lot of things, but they don't really make a difference. We believe that NeuroArts interventions will be embedded in healthcare, public health, and society, and that NeuroArts will drive design of all places and spaces. And I'm talking about in the next 5 to 10 years. And that NeuroArts will shape every child's development and learning experiences, and that the arts practices and aesthetic experiences will be embraced as a core healthy behavior like sleep, like exercise, and like nutrition. So I mentioned a little bit about the economic analyses. We're continuing to do this because we think this kind of evidence is really important and it's really compelling for building policy. And then we also, Daisy. We also have launched in our infrastructure area something called the NeuroArts Resource Center. This is a global watering hole. Anybody can come anytime to meet somebody that they want to know, to share their own research, and to start to build this ecosystem around the world of NeuroArts. So we launched this in May of this year. We've had hundreds of thousands of page views. We've had thousands of people sign up. It's free. We have over 123 disciplines and over 2,000 research papers that have already been put on this. So this is a center that you will build and you will create. And finally, the Blueprint's not working alone. We are working with many, many organizations locally and nationally and globally, including the World Health Organization, the World Bank, many foundations, many organizations that work with different sectors have all been part of this. And we're really excited to include Atlanta and the Woodruff Center as part of that. So let me close in saying that I believe that art is our one true language. It speaks to our need to reveal, heal, and transform. And it transcends our ordinary lives and lets us imagine what is possible. Like the science of exercise and nutrition, the arts and aesthetics are essential. And for success and perhaps, I think, the survival of our humanity. So thank you so much for listening to me.